You think you know me.
Today on Security VIP, we feature the CRO of Alcatraz AI, Rick Nee. Get ready for nothing but the truth.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Security VIP podcast, your home for nothing but the truth. As always, I'm your host, Taylor May. And on today's episode, you may have heard of this company. I've known about this company for years in the security industry. Great company. It's a company called Alcatraz AI. My guest on this episode is the Chief Revenue Officer, Mr. Rick Nee. And Rick, this is the first time you and I are actually meeting, but I've known about you guys for years, my friend. But welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks. Appreciate it. I'm doing well today. How are you?
Doing good, man. We're surviving and thriving. Obviously, here in Dallas, we had a couple winter ice storm a couple weeks ago, and of course, everyone freaks out when they see white stuff down here.
Yeah, I heard
You know,
that.
so
Yeah. Yeah, we're going through some rain today. If you hear any wind, hopefully you won't hear any wind in the background, but in California, when it rains or it's windy, they shut the power off pretty
yeah,
quickly these days,
yeah,
as you can imagine. So,
yeah.
but all good, man. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, man, pleasure's all mine. I when I first heard about you guys, man, probably a couple years ago, The Rock. It's
All
awesome,
right.
badass name, number one.
Totally.
But super effective. A lot of my customers and end users that I know have relationships with are using it and having great success with it. But so we'll talk about The Rock and everything else you're doing at Alcatraz, maybe your goals for the revenue side. But let's just tell my
Yeah.
listeners, man, about Rick Nee, who you are and what you're about.
All right. I guess in a nutshell, I started out in the Marine Corps. I'm a Bostonian by trade, and I guess when people ask me, why did you go into the Marine Corps after college? And I tell people, Boston is a very patriotic place, the Revolutionary War, and even to this day, Bostonians value public service. So, did 7 years in the Marine Corps. I was an infantry officer, did some combat tours in Iraq. And really, if I really think about this journey getting here to Alcatraz and thinking about physical security, my first introduction to physical security was then in the Middle East, when you're thinking about securing locations as you're moving around. And it's very ad hoc and it's very risky and things like that. But I eventually got out. It was a tough decision. Anybody that has served in the military will tell you it's always a hard decision if you enjoy it. Went into the data center space with a Fortune 500 company called TE Connectivity, cabling, hardware, software. And I was servicing data center customers before people knew really what a data center was. So maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, but now
Those are
all you
popping up everywhere now, by the way. Data centers are popping up everywhere.
yeah, yeah, and that's we could talk a little bit about that. That's a big focus for us. But we were at TE Connectivity doing that early days with Google and Meta and those kinds of companies, and so did that for 12 years. I guess in some regards, I'm a little bit different in that light. I didn't move around a bunch in my career. Then went to Gartner, and serendipitously, I was doing my MBA, and I got exposed to cybersecurity. And then I realized, wow, there's a lot of mission critical, mission oriented type of people. We were talking about a little bit before we started recording, jumping around physical to cyber. They're both very mission oriented.
Right.
So I decided I wanted to get into that space, and that's what I did. I went to a startup for 5 years. And I was at a company called Authenticate, and we were servicing the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, Fortune 500 companies, etc., doing sensitive digital research, threat research. And what I found there, Taylor, is the digital and the physical world is really starting to intersect much more than it used to. And so the teams that we were talking to, executive protection, brand protection, insider threat, a lot of those had an origin or an initial investigation in the digital world, but they had practical physical security ramifications or the other way as well.
Right.
So I had a great run there, 5 years. And then similar to you, I found out about Alcatraz and the Rock about a year ago, and I did a lot of homework. And I said, the opportunity presented itself. I said, my gosh, this is such an amazing opportunity, amazing product, amazing culture, amazing mission. And yeah, it was the right timing. And I joined several weeks ago, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be here.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service, my friend. Really appreciate that. I worked with a Navy SEAL company back in the past, so I'm sure you've got some
Okay.
stories with some SEALs, and there's always I know a theme or a joke between departments. But it's funny you mentioned the convergence, man, of physical and cyber, because you're right. For so long, at least on the physical side, it was always like a side load mentality. Like we don't talk to the
Mhm.
infosec guys, we don't
That's
talk to
right.
the IT guys. Those guys are weird. We focus on physical. But now, man, like that convergence and that synergy is happening, and it almost has to happen because of what's coming out of the security industry as far as cutting edge technology, and obviously what you guys do at Alcatraz is part of that
Yeah.
innovation. So maybe walk me through. Obviously, I know why you joined Alcatraz. Number one, because it's a really cool company. It's effective and it's practical. People are using it. But from your perspective, I mean, and also my listeners, maybe share more insight about why you joined and kind of what the company specializes in, like the vertical focus or market focus.
Yeah.
Walk me through that.
So, for those that don't know, maybe like the canned or elevator pitch of what Alcatraz does. So, AI-driven facial authentication. So, we effectively invented facial authentication as a service. So, any door, turnstile, any access point, you might come across our product, which you just mentioned, the Rock. Pretty small device. Generally, is going to mount on a wall. You might see it above a card reader, on a turnstile. Um, it uses advanced biometrics to grab a digital profile of your face. It's ones and zeros. It's not an actual picture. It's a binary string of data. But what's interesting about what we do is, first of all, it's enterprise grade security, um, military grade actually, and it's a frictionless user experience. So when I say those things, people say, "Well, what do you mean by frictionless?" The user enrollment process we can do mobily. It's very, very simple. So, Taylor, let's say you join an org today. You get a link on your phone and an email. You open it. There's a consent management. You opt in. You take your phone. You put it up. You do a quick facial recognition scan, and then you show up to your employer that day, and you're authenticated, and you get into the building. And so it's incredibly frictionless from that regard. Privacy is also a big thing with us. We are built with privacy by design. So people say, well, what does that mean? So we don't store PII, right? A lot of access control systems or other biometric tools, they store databases with data, right? But social security numbers, names, driver's licenses, race, religion, we don't do any of that. So that is sort of in a nutshell the product, and this privacy by design. Where do we where and who do we serve? The use cases are numerous. We have a few hundred logos, 35 Fortune 500 customers, stadiums, arenas, financial service customers, biotech, healthcare, and data centers. And maybe like to just put a bow on that, a good example. So we were just piloting at a sports facility for a professional sports team. And we talk about frictionless, but you also talk on the other end, which is having a tight security posture, right? As you know, those often don't go hand in hand. That user experience and the and the tight security that the security practitioners want. So we recently kicked off a pilot, and we have several professional sports teams as customers. And so it was the simple use case was the security guys wanted the sports facilities where the players were working out locked down. The players were getting in and out of these lockdown facilities with either a fob or some sort of mobile credential. And
Right.
then they're getting their credentials in their locker room or wherever. And then they can't get back into the facility, and the coach is upset. And the coach said, "Listen, I want these facilities just open." And the security guys are like, "We can't do that." And so the win-win in this situation was, we set up this pilot, that mobile enrollment. Of course, the players are asking, "Well, what about PII?" No, we don't store any of your data. Enroll them quickly. Security's happy. They can now lock down the facilities, and the players can now move around the arena and the different facilities without having to have their phone or some fob key or remember a PIN code or all the above. So that's us in a nutshell.
Well, you can't forget your face, right? I mean, you can't
You
lose your
can't, you
face.
can't, you can't forget your face. That's
Well,
exactly right.
it was funny, man. Like, because I sold facial recognition in the past with a company called AnyVision. Now they're called Usto. But the whole privacy conversation was a big topic back when face rec first hit the market. Obviously, face authentication. But what always surprised me, man, is like your iPhone. You use face authentication like every
Totally.
single day to log into account, to open your phone, whatever it may be. So it's always like that argument of like, what is privacy to an extent when you guys are using it every single day in your iPhone or your smartphone. And plus, you
Yeah.
just hit the nail on the head. It's really just a mathematical vector, right? That it's a number system of what you guys are actually storing, not an actual PII or GDPR,
Yeah.
mentality. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny, man. You mentioned professional sports stadiums. Obviously, I'm in Dallas. I'm a Cowboys fans. We absolutely are
Won't
garbage.
hold that against you.
Yeah, I know, I know. I'm not happy with our recent decisions with our head coach decision, Jerry Jones and stuff. But on another note, you mentioned we'll talk about data centers, but you mentioned professional sports venues, and I know the Philadelphia Eagles are actually a client of Alcatraz. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I'm at liberty to say is
Well, I
who
know
is
for a
who
fact they
isn't,
are because I know the integrator that did that job up there, and obviously with the Super Bowl this weekend. But I know they're having a lot of success with it. And you're right. Player as an NFL player, they want seamless. They want seamless access. They're forgetful. If they lose their phone, they lose a key fob. I can't believe like players are still using key fobs nowadays. I feel like
right?
that's so old
I,
school technology.
I would argue that in 2025, users in general, if you think about sort of the attention span and you get your apps on demand to do this or to do that, or to simply move through a facility or an arena or a healthcare facility, whatever it is, quickly, frictionlessly, like that is something that is expected, not a nice to have these
Yeah.
days, in my opinion, right? Like, think of just being in a facility. I mean, the irony of this, the last day at my last role, trying to get in, I had my card and then they had changed the PIN system, the alarm went off, and I'm like, I'm just trying to get in to drop some stuff off. So I think, yeah, for players, for sure, you can imagine that use case. But I would say if you're in a manufacturing facility, you're in a corporate boardroom, wherever you are, that ease of use and the ability to sort of navigate with that security posture, to me, it's a win-win.
I would imagine too, Rick, with your background with being in cyber, like
Mhm.
that's probably an easy conversation for you to have regarding security as far as The Rock and Alcatraz, because a lot of people that are in physical, they don't understand the cyber lingo or the cyber language when it goes on the behind the scenes. So I imagine that's a competitive advantage for you, just as a CRO of the company, to train your team that, hey, look, we've got security components built into The Rock that are going to allow you to be, more secure versus, what you've seen out there in the market as far as being hacked and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And when I think of legacy like access control,
Yeah.
spending 5 years on the cyber side, and I was aware and had done some homework, but it's surprising to me uh, how short some of these systems fall. Whether it's what do they say, the installed and forgotten,
Hmm.
uh, the failure to update security vulnerabilities, the non-compliance. We are in a world, Taylor, where compliance and privacy demands are only getting more stringent, right?
Yeah.
And so when you talk about companies that have these outdated systems that they don't adhere to GDPR, BIPA, or CCPA, whatever the standard of where you live and what's required. And so it's like, wow. And then you just think of access cards, and they are as like a cyber world, like yeah, everything's a threat, right? Zero trust. And you just think, and you can explain to, anyone like, okay, what can happen when the card can be lost? It can be copied, it can be shared. And then there's the tailgating piece, which is something that The Rock did not mention that in the initial explanation. Tailgating, for those that don't know, right? Taylor's walking into the building and I run right behind. Maybe Taylor's just being friendly. Maybe Taylor doesn't even know. But with legacy access control and cards, you can see that that has happened a lot. And when you think of breaches, uh, we yeah back to cyber. Sure, a lot of the breaches that happen are driven in the digital world, but someone told me and shared a report with me the other day. 10% of all breaches are physical.
Mm.
So you think of tailgating.
Yeah.
and somebody getting into a building, whether that's insider threat or you think you're doing someone a favor, and then they're in there and they're sticking a USB, you know, and drive into some port, and they're out of there. So yeah, I think the industry out like coming from cyber, I think physical is definitely access control and physical security is definitely ripe for I would say disruption or an enhanced security posture than what we see in a lot of places today.
Well, that was like the main reason why I went to go join cyber for a little bit because I felt like the most opportunity for cyber wasn't physical because just being in physical the
Interesting.
last decade is because I know a lot of camera manufacturers, VMS manufacturers, access control manufacturers, they weren't as secure as they were promoting, and that
Yeah.
part of that was just because they don't have the knowledge or maybe they don't have the right department or they don't understand. But I kid you not, man, I was at a home builder in Houston, and this home builder builds like 1.2 to $2.5 million homes in Houston, Texas. Obviously, in California, that's a different story. How much
Yeah,
the
yeah,
dollar value there, but what surprised me the most, man, I was helping them out just install some of their new cameras. Again, they had analog cameras. They finally converted to IP, which is a whole another conversation we can talk about. But I was helping them install their cameras, and I shit you not, man, the password for their camera was ABC Homes 123. I'm
right?
like, dude, like, come on. So it's like that's part of it. And then also the second part of it, you hit on it was like the firmware and the software updates. They had never
Yeah,
updated their whole
yeah,
firmware. And so you talk about the vulnerability, you talk about opportunity for cyber attacks to happen in physical. You're right. There's a lot of cyber attacks happening to physical, and I won't call out names, but there has been physical security companies, well-known physical security companies that have been hacked and exposed in the industry. So I'm glad
yeah,
to see that again. I'm going to nail this home. I'm so glad to see cyber and physical now converging, at least for the physical security side, because we don't have
yeah,
a lot of cyber professionals on the
yeah,
physical side. But it's going to take someone like you in this position to obviously promote Alcatraz and what you guys do, but just to kind of create that narrative for the rest of the
yeah.
industry to kind of follow.
Yeah. One other point on that cyber and physical sort of intersection. I think my last role in the cyberspace at Authenticate, we had 500 or 600 logos. We had a bunch of Fortune 1000 customers. And it was interesting during that time as we went through discovery and talking to CISOs and threat leaders, we would start to connect dots and we started to see reporting structures change. So it used to be the head of physical security might report to the VP of facilities, and in some cases that's obviously still the case.
Right.
Or head of corporate protection would be on that physical security team, and again they would report to a facility manager. And now what you're seeing is head of brand protection, head of corporate security, head of executive protection. They're dotted line or reporting into the security team, the cyber team. And so I think that some corporations have caught on to the synergy or the symbiosis that you could see with digital and physical. And then when we worked with those kinds of customers, the deals always went quicker
Of course.
because the value prop and how they were using our product and communicating was much easier to sort of digest, if you will, versus oh, this physical security team, they got their own system, they got their own process. We don't, and I think that is changing quite a bit, especially in the Fortune 500 space, where they have those resources, and so it'll be exciting to see what that looks like over the next 5 or 10 years.
You're spot on. What's funny is a lot of since I spent some time in the cyber, then I came back to physical. A lot of my cybersecurity guys that are now in physical, they ask me, Taylor, just curious, but and these guys have like 10 plus years of cyber experience. They come to physical and they're like, Taylor, I'm just curious, but are physical security guys just dumb? Like, are they slow? And I'm like, well, a lot of the times you're probably correct in that assessment because we're not up to par of what it's occurring on a device as far as like EDR and obviously phishing campaigns, breaches, etc. And it's just funny because I have that conversation often. I'm like, you just have to talk a little bit slower and more like direct with physical security guys. But to your point, people that already have that knowledge or that reporting structure to a CISO or a security makes everything so much more streamlined as far as procurement,
Yeah.
man, and
I
implementation.
would say those I would actually even disagree. I would say, the folks that are running those physical security teams have a very specific skill set,
Yeah, they
right?
do. I
How
agree.
to lock down and secure buildings. And if you look at that persona, ex-military, ex-law enforcement, but they understand, you know, the physical nature of protecting a facility. And in this day and age, um, that is a very valuable skill set.
I agree. I think the hurdle there was a lot of these physical security guys just were standoffish to
Sure,
cyber, and they
sure.
didn't they just and that was part of it was just like I want to stay in my lane and focus on what I want to focus. But
That's right. That's right.
but I feel like we have to push now because a lot of these technologies that are coming out of physical require a cybersecurity element, and that requires approval from security, InfoSec, etc.
Yeah, they definitely do. And you're definitely seeing platforms too that are coming up that are trying to integrate all of these different tools that are assessing both cyber and physical. And I think that that's, if you can imagine your command center, that's what it's going to look like in the future.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. So let's pivot back to your position, man, at as CRO. Obviously, head of revenue. I always say revenue's king. So
Yes, it is.
without revenue, man, you don't have a company essentially. So what are you focusing on, man? Obviously, you just started Alcatraz, but I want to kind of highlight what you guys are planning for 2025, growth
Yeah,
ambitions, revenue goals, maybe vertical markets, hiring.
sure.
Might walk you through kind of the strategy for you and your position as a CRO at the company.
Well, thankfully, because we've been around since 2016, we have a market signal, right? We have a few hundred logos. I had mentioned we have 35 plus Fortune 500. So the logical thing which Alcatraz has done is to sort of reverse engineer that data and said, okay, where are we most valuable? We think we can sell across many verticals, and we continue to do that. But if we're going to talk about an offensive posture, our main focus, because there's only so much time in the day,
Right.
financial services, critical infrastructure, um, higher education, and the one that I'm most excited about is data centers.
Nice.
And all of those have, different use cases or pain points, but all, heavily regulated compliance and privacy and safety are all paramount um, at those kinds of places. So we're structuring the team to go after with our partners those verticals, and the data center one is our biggest bet. If we are very successful, we've had success in the data center, but if we triple down on that, the success there and could be exponential. There's just every day in the news someone's talking about data center. Why do we why do we care so much about the data center? Obviously, it's a space that's growing. But if you think about the challenges that are going to surface for the data center, we think we're uniquely positioned to address them. Two of them are one is that again, that unauthorized access, that tailgating. Um, if you think of the largest insider threat example in history, it was Edwin Snowden, right? An insider access, badged in, supposed to be in there, but perhaps wasn't supposed to be in a specific area, excuse me, of a facility, whatever. When you think of data centers, hundreds of thousands of square feet,
Yeah.
right? Millions of square feet, uh, and you think of how you can contain folks in these data centers. So you think of co-location, hyperscalers, enterprise data centers, they're commingled. You might have one row is, Taylor's company stuff, the other row is Netflix stuff, this row is a bank's. And when we think about our product, the Rock, we don't just think of the outer perimeter. We're thinking about using facial recognition and access control at the aisle level, at the rack level, at the, whatever compartmentalized piece of the data center. And again, if you think of a million plus square foot, and you think of someone maybe that's supposed to be in there, but perhaps Taylor's not supposed to be hanging at this section of the data center. We can do that. And then the second piece is just like basic supply and demand with labor.
Yeah.
If you look at the proliferation of data centers, most of them now are going up, Taylor, in the rural spaces, right? So, Data Center Alley in the DC, Virginia area, and then California, those are in some regards saturated. Sure, there'll be more. But if you look at Ohio and Texas and Florida and Indiana, you're starting to see where there's real estate and power, right? There's natural gas, whatever it is that they need, and there's all kinds of bottlenecks here. But trained security on access control, on incident response, living in rural areas, that's going to be a supply and demand challenge. There was an article about an electrician shortage to build data centers, and there's these traveling electricians that are being outbid because, Meta or Microsoft, these guys can't get enough labor to build it. It's going to be the same once they put it up and they got the racks in there, and they're like, oh, wait, we don't have enough security staff here.
Hmm.
I think it's arguable that our product can help with that. Of course, you're still going to need physical, actual security staff in the building, but we think we can aid that and help minimize some of that shortage. So that and the insider threat thing, and then all of the compliance and privacy, right? Everything that is required to operate a data center is effectively, to me, critical infrastructure,
Yep.
right?
I was gonna say, yep.
Obviously the DoD ones, the CIA, the NSA, but the big hyperscaler colo sites are also storing very, very sensitive information, and their value prop completely falls apart if there's a breach. So, for those reasons, if we are wildly successful in the data center space this year, and we're talking in a year, Taylor, I would say that we've been successful.
It's funny, I speak with a lot of GCs, and a lot of these GCs, whether it's a Balfour, Manhattan, a DPR, I'm like, hey, what are you seeing the most as far as construction? And they're like, data centers
Yeah,
or professional sports venues or practice facilities. That seems to
totally.
be a common one. Obviously, school district stuff that pop up here and there. But to your point, Rick, let me ask you this. Do you think like the issue, not an issue, but maybe like an area where you can help out the sales team at Alcatraz when it comes to implementation, deployment? I was going to ask that question anyway, but you mentioned it. Obviously, focus on the perimeters and stuff, that's kind of a given, but like internal, like hot pockets inside the facility, 100,000 plus square foot facility. Do you feel like that was an area where Alcatraz wasn't asking for that sale or that implementation, or are you telling your sales team like, look, we need to start more broader, we need to get more deeper? I mean, walk me through kind of that area where you're going to help
Yeah.
out with.
I actually think we've had the opposite challenge. Like we've been able to secure corporate boardroom,
Mm,
or you're in a warehouse that's storing a few $1 million worth of NVIDIA chips, or a very sensitive area where employee records are held. There's compliance and privacy and security concerns all over those, and the security team quickly says we need to we your product, whether it's two-factor, three-factor,
yeah.
like we get this, and because it's military grade encryption and it meets all the privacy things, those are actually for us the quick wins.
Mm,
It's actually going back to the discussion earlier, the broader use cases around access control, walking into the corporate campus on that outer perimeter, those are the ones where we're trying to disrupt the industry, I think, at volume, showing that our product with consent and privacy and flow of traffic, like we can do a lot of things that the current access control card and system and card reader don't necessarily do. Even from a just making the life easier of the administrator that's got to enroll visitors, or onboarding in a large company, or a large traffic area, like those things that we can solve. So I think that's actually the space. But in the data center one, yeah, we've been focused for sure on more on the perimeter. I brought that up because when people think of a data center, for those that don't, that aren't in that space, the obvious is gosh, you got to have a fence up and a gate, and then there's probably some security with a lock and a door, right, or some access control system. But what people, I think, fail to sometimes recognize is that once you get into a data center, there's layers, right, of security on a need-to-know basis, and so we just know that because it's critical infrastructure and there's all this compartmentalization, that we just see our value prop throughout that entire facility as being a no-brainer for us.
no, I mean it makes sense. I guess the pushback you're probably seeing or not experiencing is, people are sometimes just stagnant in their ways.
Yeah,
They still want to use
100%.
proxy cards, but obviously the big thing now in the industry, everyone talks about mobile access control. Obviously, Phil at HID is a big advocate for mobile access control. Are you seeing that still as pushback to implementing like the ROC, or do you see it as a supplement, like another two-factor, three-factor
I think it
authentication?
depends on I think it depends on the customer. I see some pushback. I see how this could work together. We could pick apart mobile too.
Yeah,
Uh, but I think overall, and I was just looking just as an example. There was sort of the report out from Security News, state of access control 2024. And if you look at that report, this particular report I was looking at from 4 years ago, the amount of adoption physical security leaders, even going into the cloud, went from 20% to 49%.
yeah,
And I've been talking to prospects and some customers that we have. Half are still against going into a cloud environment. And we try to educate them and explain how secure the cloud can be. But I think that 25% to 40 or 45% is actually quite encouraging. So I think mobile, I think we have a far superior solution to mobile, in my opinion. But I think mobile biometrics, I think you're seeing more of a shift to those sort of technologies. And I think more than not have recognized in the industry that your traditional access card is antiquated and is a known is a if you want to use it as part of a two or a three factor, great, right? But using it as your only security piece to get in and out of a facility is not going to probably work in 5 or 10 years.
I've had that same conversation on the video side. Like, a lot of my careers on the video side, obviously AI and stuff, but like the analog,
Yeah.
debacle, like, well,
Yeah.
it's not broken, it's still working up there. I'm like, yeah, but got cobwebs on it. When's the last update you've had?
There was a stat I read the other day that if you look at your traditional, not we, this was a enterprise-wide survey. So I would argue that if we micro-segmented this and said computer software companies or certain tech companies, it might look different. But the total spend on access control versus the spend on collaboration tools like Zoom. It's 4x for the collaboration tools. The physical security and the access control systems is still a smaller piece of the wallet. It's growing, and I think it will continue to grow as we sort of educate and make folks aware. I think, that same study I just referenced, I think 40 or 45% of security leaders said top of mind was updating their access control system. And I thought, okay, well, that's a very encouraging thing. That kind of goes back to the on-prem versus cloud. Maybe there's recognition that the card is not necessarily the most secure way to do it, or hey, it's not broke, don't fix it. I think a lot of that education awareness is finally there. And if we're having this conversation in 5 years, I'll say 70% are in the cloud, 25, 30% more are using biometrics, certainly more using mobile as well. That's my prediction based on
Well,
what
I
I'm
was
seeing.
going to bring that up because I started this podcast in May of 2020, right when inception of COVID, and the
Yeah.
the in- the industry, or the one vertical market that I've got a lot of expertise in, is gaming and casinos, and that industry has always been on-prem, server in a rack,
Yep.
never approached cloud. And this was 5 years ago. Today, 2024, and now 2025, all my casino friends are like, "Oh, we're putting stuff in the cloud. We're putting stuff in the cloud." So, to your point, I agree with you that we're going to see more cloud adoption, and it's because we're pushing the industry. It's companies like yourself. It's companies that I promote on the
Yep.
podcast. But a lot of it's just education because they didn't really trust cloud 5, 10 years ago. Some people don't
Sure.
trust cloud today, and there's always argument and counter arguments for on-prem. But a lot of my casino friends are approaching like either a hybrid model where they both base your data
Yeah.
on-prem as well as cloud, but a lot of them are actually going full cloud now because of the level
Yeah.
of security.
I mean, look, if the Department of Defense and the intelligence community is using the cloud,
My
it's
whole point. Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
it's probably pretty good. I have no yes, we have an on-prem solution, right? We have a cloud solution. We're flexible. You want on-prem, we'll do that. But we think we'll make your life easier and more secure in the cloud. But I think back to another point earlier, which is as these physical security leaders and these cyber CISOs or cyber leaders are merging together, I see that becoming an easier conversation.
100%. Can get more of your cyber friends to come over, man. We need more of that
Yeah.
adoption.
Yeah. I mean, I just love security. And like I was mentioning earlier, I'm pretty happy that it's come full circle and that there's no silos or the silos are breaking down. Um, those are the companies to watch.
100%, man. You're spot on. Well, cool, man. Final question, and when I started this again 5 years ago, it was a 60-second hot seat question, and it always gave my guests like an inclination of like, oh, Taylor, I'm nervous what you're going to ask, but really it's an easy question for a revenue leader like yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, so it's a 60-second hot seat of why Alcatraz, why the company, and obviously as the leader, revenue leader of the company, you should be the number one salesperson anyway at the company. So, 60 seconds, Rick. Why Alcatraz, man?
I think I could do it even quicker.
There you go.
So, um, if we care deeply about security, privacy, compliance, and perhaps most importantly, the user experience. Our founder came from Apple, right? The ultimate consumer company. But when I'm saying that we care deeply about these security, privacy, compliance, and the user experience, it's very rare that you can truly care about all of those and do them well without making big compromise. Alcatraz AI does do that. And that is the ultimate reason why I joined this company is they're not making it overly secure, but a bad user experience or a great user experience and keeping security leaders up at night or the compliance or privacy folks. So we have cracked that code and I'm really excited to be part of that journey. And I would just as a plug, check out our website, Alcatraz.ai. We have a frictionless, no sales demo that you can watch, or if you're coming to ISC West, we can give a live demo. We'd love you to stop by.
There you go, man. Mic drop. Nothing but the truth. I like that. And it's cool, man, because I've seen the growth and the evolution of the company when it first started. And because you guys are not really in startup mode anymore. You're not really in land and expand mode. You've got hundreds of logos. You've got great logos,
Yeah,
enterprise logos. So now it's really just about fueling and expanding and obviously, going after those certain markets that you just hit on. So
got
Rick, my
it.
friend, really appreciate the conversation, dude. Always
Likewise.
welcome back on. You're welcome. I've told Linda this and Tina that you guys have customers or partners that want to be on episodes. Open invitation. You
Yeah.
guys are always welcome on the podcast. My next question was just, hey, how can more people learn more about yourself as well as the company? You mentioned the website, but anything else you want to throw in there?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out. I'm on there morning, day, and night. I actually just subscribed to your newsletter on there. So that's where you can find me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to networking with more people in the physical world. Got a bunch in the cyber world, and now I'm excited to meet more folks on this side.
Awesome, Rick. Well, appreciate the time, my friend, and I wish you nothing but the best for 2025, dude.
Likewise, appreciate having me on today.
Awesome. Guys and girls, that was Rick Nee, the Chief Revenue Officer of Alcatraz AI. Make sure to go connect with him. He's looking for more physical security friends. I've got plenty listeners on this podcast that are physical security, so go connect with them, my friends. And if you want more information about our podcast series, make sure to check out our website at svip.news. Connect with us on LinkedIn at SVIP, and wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Apple, iHeart, Amazon, as well as YouTube. The list goes on. You guys stay safe out there. We'll catch you guys all on the next one.